Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AAFR Talk. We're going to have Fred Jackson, our news director here at One News Now, in the studio with us at 2:15 to talk about a very sobering ruling that just handed down. This is breaking news from the state Supreme Court in the state of New Mexico. Now, you got a number of troubling things going on down there in New Mexico. You have county clerks who are issuing marriage licenses with no statutory authority to do so. Same-sex marriage is illegal in the state of New Mexico. It is not recognized in the state of New Mexico. So when these county clerks are handing out these wedding licenses, they have no authority to do it. They are breaking the law when they do that. But the state attorney general has said he is not going to defend the state law of New Mexico that defines marriage as one man, one woman. He's not going to defend it. So if he gets challenged, it's just going to go down because nobody is going to show up to defend it. And now it turns out that the state Supreme Court has ruled against Elaine Photography. This was this photographer in New Mexico, run by a husband and wife. They were approached by a lesbian couple to photograph their lesbian commitment ceremony. Now realize lesbian relationships have no legal status of any sort in New Mexico. They don't have civil unions. They don't have domestic partnerships. They don't have gay marriage. So this is a purely symbolic ceremony, and anybody can go out and do whatever ceremony they want. Nobody's going to stop them from doing it. But it doesn't have any legal significance, doesn't have any legal status. And this photographer politely declined to photograph this commitment ceremony, at which point the lesbian couple got sued. They filed a formal complaint against her with the Human Rights Commission in the state of New Mexico, which fined the photographer almost $7,000, $6,700. They appealed to an appeals court in the New Mexico judicial system, lost there, the photographer did, so they appealed. Our friends at Alliance Defending Freedom were the ones representing them. Jordan Lawrence, outstanding First Amendment lawyer, they appealed to the New Mexico State Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court of the state of New Mexico today ruled against this Christian photographer. So ladies and gentlemen, this, we're seeing this accelerating constraint of religious liberty. It's alarming, the rate at which this is happening in America. It's not just in Egypt where the religious liberty of Christians now is under severe assault. So we will talk a little bit more with Fred Jackson, our news leader, at the break. Let's see where I want to go at this point. Let's talk a little bit about this shooting in Oklahoma. And I think I've got a soundbite or two from this. It turns out, we have this deal in Oklahoma, Duncan, Oklahoma, small town in Oklahoma, not a major metropolitan area. And these two blacks shot, and they had a white driver in their truck. Two blacks actually did the shooting, and they shot to death a white man who was jogging, a baseball player jogging on a road. This was in the middle of the day. Now, they didn't get apprehended until the father of a 17-year-old called the police. He was called by his son, who was 17, and they had been trying to recruit him to join a gang. I think it was the Crips. So they got some gang wannabes there. They want to be Crips. You're familiar with the Bloods and the Crips, and they wanted to form some kind of Crips gang, and who knows how far along they were with that. Maybe they were just gang wannabes, but the important thing is this was gang activity. And the 17-year-old called his dad and said, look, they were trying to recruit him into their gang, and the father wouldn't let it happen. The father would not permit his son to join this gang. And so the boy told the guys, look, no, I'm not going to join your gang. So he called his dad, look, they're coming to kill me because I won't join the gang. So the dad calls the police, and these guys are apprehended, and it turns out these were the guys that had shot the white guy to death in the back in cold blood. So clearly, I mean, it's just a lynching is what it is. So it was a lynching taking place out there in the middle of the day on a country road in Duncan, Oklahoma. And the father's the one that's saying, look, this might even been a gang initiation. That's what the father was suggesting. I was talking to a law enforcement officer here in Mississippi who was telling me about what's going on in the capital city of Mississippi, Jackson, where you've got these gangs down there. And in order to get into the gang, there's an initiation process you have to go through, and it involves targeting a white male or a white female. If it's a white male, you have to attack him, you have to beat him up, and you have to rip him off. If it is a white female, you not only attack her, you drag her off into the woods and rape her, and then you get to come in to the gang. This is happening in the largest city right now in the state of Mississippi. And so apparently what this father believes is this was part of a gang initiation. They had to lynch a white guy in order to get in the gang. And you know what Jesse Jackson said about this lynching? Jesse Jackson said lynchings are frowned upon. That was all of the moral outrage that he could summon. And it turns out, let's grab clip number 1, Rob, that the spokesman for Barack Obama, the White House had no idea this had even gone on. They didn't know anything about it. This guy is totally and completely clueless. And remember, and Ed Henry, Fox News, brings this up. Remember that when the Trayvon Martin thing happened, President Obama was out in front of that deal. If I had a son, he would look like Trayvon. Well, apparently the line, if I had a son, he would look like the shooter. Apparently that doesn't have quite the same ring to it. So they're not interested in getting out in front of this or even commenting on it. And the White House spokesman didn't even know it had happened. Let's listen.
But, any act of violence is something that, the president, I think himself, has spoken pretty eloquently about violence in our communities. And he stood at this podium a few weeks ago where he talked about his concern about the impact that violence is having on, in particular, young people in this country.
Yeah, we heard Trayvon Martin here and in the Rose Garden. Why hasn't he spoken out on this, in this case?
Well,
there was a judicial proceeding. There was one in the Trayvon Martin case. He spoke out extensively on that one.
Well, I'm not sure that there's some people in this room I don't think who would agree with you that the president spoke out extensively on it. I think that he answered
He was in the Rose Garden?
Yeah, he
spoke on it?
And he got
a question.
He got asked a question about it.
And he didn't have to answer, but he did.
And
then he came out here himself
at the conclusion of the legal process
Sure.
and shared some thoughts.
For several minutes.
Sure. That are, I think, where he expressed his concerns about the impact of violence in communities all across the country. And he talked about the number of things that that the government can do, but also a number of things that we can do in our communities, whether it's parents, churches, and communities can do to try to address the impact of violence, and whether there's more that we can do to try to protect our children.
So it gets very generic when it's a black on white crime. It gets very generic. We've got to do what we can to protect our children from violence. So clearly seems to be some racial favoritism being played here by the president and by the White House. Almost as if black victims of violence are of more value to the president than white victims of violence. So we'll see how all of that plays out. I've got a soundbite from Reverend Al Sharpton referring to his claim that a lot in the black community are suffering from what he called battered race syndrome. Well, the only one that's been battered over the last couple of days that I know of is this white guy in Oklahoma. He's dead, and the Obama administration has been completely silent about that. In my view is that every crime is a hate crime. We shouldn't even have a category of race-based hate crimes. If a guy gets cut down in cold blood, that ought to be a capital offense. I don't care who the victim is. Back in 2.